After the tragic death of her mother, a 5-year-old girl uncovers a horrifying secret about her father, a secret that could change her life forever. Will she find the courage to expose the truth and protect herself before it's too late? What would you do if you were in her position? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and follow our channel to discover more powerful and emotional stories. Let's begin this unforgettable journey where courage faces betrayal, and the fight for justice is sparked by the heart of a little girl. The morning sun cast a golden glow over the small garden as Emma's laughter filled the air. The 5-year-old darted between rows of wildflowers, her tiny hands picking the brightest blooms she could find. "Mommy, look! I found a purple one! It smells so good!" Emma exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Sophia, her mother, smiled warmly and crouched down beside her. Gently brushing a strand of hair from Emma's face, she said, "Did you know, sweetie? A long time ago, in a garden just like this, there was a fairy who used purple flowers to create magic." Emma's face lit up with curiosity. "What kind of magic, Mommy?" Sophia tapped her daughter's nose playfully. "The magic of love. As long as you believe in love, you can face anything in life." Emma beamed, holding the flowers close to her heart. Every day with Sophia felt like a dream. Life was simple, but it was filled with love and warmth. Sophia always made sure her daughter felt cherished, from telling bedtime stories to preparing her favorite meals. But no one could have guessed how fragile that happiness was. The next morning, Sophia walked Emma to school as usual. Kneeling down to fix Emma's pink bow, she kissed her daughter on the forehead. "I've got a few things to take care of today, but I'll pick you up early, okay? Promise?" Emma asked, clutching her mother's hand tightly. "Promise," Sophia said with a gentle smile before waving goodbye. That was the last time Emma saw her mother. When the school bell rang that afternoon, Emma rushed to the gate, expecting to see her mother's familiar figure waiting. Instead, the school principal approached her, her expression heavy with concern. "Emma, sweetie, come with me to my office for a moment," she said softly, placing a reassuring hand on Emma's shoulder. Inside the office, her father, Michael, stood by the window, his hands buried in his pockets. He didn't turn around when Emma entered. His shoulders were stiff and his gaze was fixed on something far away. "Emma," he finally said, his voice low and strained. Your mom was in an accident. She didn't make it." The words hit Emma like a thunderclap. She froze, her wide eyes filling with tears. No, that can't be true. Mommy promised she'd come back for me," she cried, her voice trembling. Michael stayed silent, his face unreadable. He didn't reach out to comfort her, didn't say a word to ease her pain. He simply stood there, as if detached from the moment. For Emma, her world shattered that day. The laughter in the garden, the bedtime stories, and her mother's loving words became nothing more than memories. And as the silence around her grew heavier, she clung to one question her mother had left behind. Could the magic of love really help her face the challenges ahead? The days after Sophia's death were cloaked in a heavy, suffocating silence. Emma, now a shadow of the lively child she had been, wandered the empty house clutching her stuffed rabbit, a gift from her mother on her last birthday. She lingered in corners where Sophia's laughter used to echo, hoping to catch even a faint memory of the warmth that once filled their home. But all she found was coldness. Michael, her father, seemed lost in his own world. At first, Emma thought he was grieving like she was, but soon she realized it wasn't sadness keeping him away, it was detachment. He barely spoke to her, and when he did, his words were clipped, as if every conversation was a burden. One evening, as they sat at the dinner table, Emma gathered the courage to speak. "Daddy," she started softly, her small voice trembling, "do you remember how Mommy used to make pancakes on Saturdays? Maybe we could do that this weekend?" Michael didn't even glance up from the newspaper he was holding. His voice, calm but cold, cut through the air. "There's no point in talking about the past, Emma. It's done. We need to move on." The words struck her like a blow. Emma stared at her untouched plate, her appetite disappearing. She wanted to cry, to scream, to tell him that moving on didn't mean forgetting. But instead, she clutched her rabbit tighter, the only comfort she had left. Weeks passed, and Emma's bright spirit continued to fade. Her once rosy cheeks grew pale, and the sparkle in her eyes dimmed. She spent most of her days sitting quietly, whispering to her stuffed rabbit as if it could hear her. She missed her mother so much it hurt, and the house, once a sanctuary of love, now felt like a prison of loneliness. It was during one of these somber days that Helen, Sophia's mother, arrived for a visit. Stepping into the house, Helen immediately noticed the change. The living room, once tidy and vibrant, now felt cold and neglected. But it was Emma who broke her heart the most. The little girl sat curled up on the couch, hugging her knees. She didn't even look up when Helen walked in. "Emma, sweetheart," Helen called softly, kneeling in front of her granddaughter. Emma lifted her head slowly, her eyes dull and lifeless. "Hi, Grandma," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "How are you doing, my love?" Helen asked, reaching out to gently touch Emma's hand. It was cold, just like the rest of her small, fragile body. "I'm fine," Emma replied, though her trembling voice betrayed her. Helen frowned, glancing at her granddaughter's thin frame. "Are you eating well? You look so thin." Emma nodded, but the silence that followed told Helen everything she needed to know. She sat down beside Emma, wrapping an arm around her. "You know, your mommy used to call me every day to tell me about you. She loved you more than anything in this world." Emma's lip quivered, but she didn't say a word. Helen gently pulled her closer, holding her in a warm embrace, as if trying to shield her from the loneliness that had taken root in the little girl's heart. That evening, after putting Emma to bed, Helen found Michael in the kitchen. He was scrolling through his phone, a cup of coffee growing cold on the counter beside him. "Michael," she began, her voice calm but firm, "I'm worried about Emma. She's not herself. She's barely eating, she doesn't talk much, and she just looks so lost." Michael let out a sigh, his face hardening. "She'll adjust," he said dismissively. "Kids are resilient. She just needs time." "Time won't fix this if she feels like no one cares about her," Helen countered, her voice rising with frustration. "She's grieving, Michael. She's just a child. She needs you." Michael's expression darkened as he set his phone down. "I'm doing my best, Helen," he said sharply. "You don't live here. You don't understand what it's like." Helen felt a wave of anger and sadness. "You're right. I don't live here," she said, her voice trembling. "But I know what love looks like, and I don't see it in this house anymore." Michael didn't respond. He turned away, his shoulders tense, leaving Helen standing in the kitchen with tears in her eyes. As she gathered her things to leave, she paused by the door and glanced back toward Emma's room. "Sophia," she whispered, "if you can hear me, I'll take care of her. I promise she won't go through this alone." As she stepped out into the cool night, Helen's resolve hardened. Emma needed someone to fight for her, and if Michael wouldn't do it, then she would. The house was quiet, as always, when Emma decided to tidy up her room one afternoon. Helen had been visiting, sitting in the kitchen and trying to coax Michael into a conversation, though he barely responded. Emma climbed onto a chair to reach the top shelf of her closet, where some of her mother's belongings had been stored. As she pulled down a small box, a stack of papers slipped out and scattered across the floor. Among them was a faded envelope, tucked carefully between old notebooks. The handwriting on the front made Emma freeze. It was her mother's. The words, written in Sophia's neat slanted script, read, "For Emma, if anything ever happens to me." Emma's fingers trembled as she picked it up. Her heart raced, a mix of longing and fear building in her chest. Slowly she unfolded the letter and began to read. "My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, it means I'm not there with you anymore, and that thought breaks my heart. I want you to know how much I love you and how proud I am of you. You are my greatest gift and the light of my life. There's something I need to share, even though it's hard to put into words. Lately, I've been feeling uneasy, like a shadow has fallen over our home. Your father? He hasn't been himself. He's been distant, secretive, and short-tempered. There are moments when I feel like I don't know him anymore. I can't explain it, Emma, but if something ever happens to me, I want you to remember this. It's okay to ask questions. It's okay to be brave and seek the truth. Trust your instincts and your heart, because they'll always guide you." Emma's eyes filled with tears as she finished reading. The paper shook in her hands, her mother's words echoing in her mind. She didn't understand everything, but one thing was clear. Her mother had been scared. Something had changed, and Sophia had felt it deeply. "Emma?" Helen's gentle voice broke the silence. She stood in the doorway, concern etched on her face. "What's that you're holding?" Emma turned, clutching the letter tightly. "It's from Mommy," she whispered, her voice trembling. Helen walked over and knelt beside Emma. "Can I see it, sweetheart?" Emma hesitated for a moment before handing it to her grandmother. Helen unfolded the paper and began to read. As her eyes scanned the words, her expression changed. First confusion, then alarm, and finally a deep sadness. When she finished, she sat back on her heels, staring at the letter as if it held all the answers she'd been searching for. "Your mother?" Helen's voice was barely above a whisper. "She was trying to protect you, Emma. She must have known something." Emma looked up at her grandmother, tears streaming down her face. "Do you think Daddy?" Her words faltered, the thought too terrifying to complete. Helen pulled Emma into a tight embrace. "I don't know, sweetheart," she said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "But we're going to find out. Whatever the truth is, we'll face it together." That night, after Emma had gone to bed, Helen sat in the living room, clutching the letter. She couldn't stop rereading Sophia's words. "He hasn't been himself. I feel like I don't know him anymore." The unease Sophia had felt now filled Helen, seeping into every corner of her mind. Her thoughts drifted to the weeks after Sophia's death. Michael had been oddly efficient in handling the funeral and the life insurance paperwork. Helen remembered offering to help, but he had brushed her off, saying, "I've got it under control." At the time, she had chalked it up to his way of coping, but now it seemed calculated. The next morning, Helen watched Michael closely. Over breakfast, he barely spoke, his attention focused on his phone. "Michael," Helen said casually, trying to mask the tension in her voice. "I was going through some of Sophia's things yesterday with Emma. She found a letter, something Sophia wrote for her." Michael froze for a split second before placing his coffee cup down. "A letter?" he asked, his tone even but his eyes narrowing slightly. "Yes," Helen replied, watching him carefully. "Sophia mentioned feeling uneasy before she died. She said she was worried about you." Michael's jaw tightened. "That doesn't mean anything. She was probably stressed, dealing with too much. You know how she could get." His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, a defensiveness that made Helen's suspicion grow stronger. After Michael left for work, Helen made a decision. She couldn't ignore the feeling gnawing at her gut. Clutching the letter, she picked up her phone and called an old friend, David, who had worked in law enforcement for years. "David," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "I need your help. Something doesn't feel right about my daughter's death. And I have a letter that might prove it." The revelation from Sophia's letter lingered in Helen's mind like a storm cloud that refused to pass. Every glance at Emma, every moment spent in the house under Michael's cold presence, only strengthened her resolve. Helen knew she couldn't stand by and watch her granddaughter wither away in this oppressive environment. She had to act. One evening, after putting Emma to bed, Helen sat at the kitchen table with the letter in her hands. It had been days since she'd spoken to David, her friend in law enforcement. He had confirmed her worst fears. Sophia's death, while ruled accidental, had details that didn't quite add up. The brakes on her car had been tampered with. Someone had deliberately sabotaged it. The thought made Helen's stomach turn. She took a deep breath and opened her laptop. She knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but Emma deserved a safe, loving home. Helen began drafting a petition for custody, her fingers trembling with both fear and determination. "Sophia," she whispered to herself, "I'll do whatever it takes to protect her." Michael wasn't oblivious to Helen's growing defiance. He noticed her watching him more closely, her words laced with suspicion during their conversations. One afternoon, as he returned home from work, he found Helen seated on the couch, a stack of papers in her lap. He didn't need to ask. He knew exactly what she was planning. That evening, he called Emma into the living room. "Sweetheart," he said, his voice unusually soft, "how about we go shopping tomorrow? You can pick out anything you like, a new doll, maybe even some clothes for school. What do you think?" Emma hesitated. It had been a long time since her father had shown her this kind of attention. She glanced at Helen, unsure of what to say. Michael smiled, kneeling to meet Emma at eye level. "I just want us to spend more time together. You're my little girl, and I love you so much." Emma nodded slowly. "Okay, Daddy." The next day, Michael took Emma to the mall. He bought her an expensive dollhouse, a set of shiny new toys, and an ice cream cone as they walked through the bustling crowds. Emma smiled faintly, but deep down she felt something was off. This sudden burst of affection didn't feel genuine. It felt forced. During dinner that evening, Michael began planting seeds of doubt. "Emma," he said casually, "did you know Grandma's getting old? Taking care of a little girl like you must be really hard for her." Emma frowned, her fork pausing midair. "But Grandma takes care of me all the time." Michael forced a smile. "I know, sweetie, but wouldn't it be better if we stayed together? Just the two of us? I'm your dad, after all. Families are supposed to stick together." Emma didn't respond, but Helen noticed the confusion in her granddaughter's eyes. Michael's words were calculated, designed to manipulate Emma into questioning her bond with her grandmother. Helen wasn't blind to Michael's tactics. She noticed the new toys, the trips to the mall, and the way Michael spoke to Emma when he thought she wasn't listening. But Helen wasn't deterred. If anything, it fueled her determination. She began gathering evidence meticulously. She requested copies of Sophia's life insurance policies, noting how quickly Michael had tried to change the beneficiaries after her death. She contacted neighbors and friends, asking if they'd noticed anything unusual about Michael's behavior. Slowly but surely, she built a case to prove that Michael's neglect and emotional distance were harming Emma. One evening, as she sorted through documents, Helen looked at Emma sitting quietly at the dining table, drawing with her new crayons. "Emma," Helen said gently, "do you like spending time with your daddy?" Emma shrugged. "He's nice sometimes, but I miss Mommy, and I like being with you, Grandma." Helen felt her heart ache at the honesty in Emma's voice. She knelt beside her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "I love you, Emma, and I promise I'll always do what's best for you." Michael wasn't about to lose without a fight. As he sensed Helen closing in, he began spreading rumors. He told friends and acquaintances that Helen, at her age, wasn't capable of raising a child. "She's overwhelmed," he said to a coworker over the phone. "She's trying, but it's just too much for her. I think she means well, but Emma needs stability." He even contacted a social worker, fabricating complaints about Helen's ability to care for Emma. "Her house isn't safe," he claimed. "She can barely keep up with things. I don't want Emma to grow up in an environment like that." Helen, aware of Michael's ploys, prepared herself for the challenges ahead. She knew his tactics were underhanded, but she also knew the truth was on her side. Sophia's letter, Michael's emotional neglect, and the mounting evidence of his suspicious behavior were all pieces of a puzzle she was determined to complete. One night, as she sat at her desk reviewing her case, Helen whispered to herself, "You won't win, Michael. Not this time." The courtroom was packed, the air heavy with tension. Every eye was on Helen and Michael as they sat on opposite sides of the room. Helen held Emma's hand tightly, offering a reassuring squeeze. Across the room, Michael sat rigid, his face carefully composed, but his clenched fists betrayed his unease. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. Her voice was firm as she began. "We are here today to determine the custody of Emma Johnson and address allegations of neglect and potential misconduct by Mr. Michael Johnson. Both parties will present their arguments." Michael's lawyer stood first, exuding confidence. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. Johnson, is a devoted father who has endured unimaginable loss. He has provided for his daughter in every way, financially, emotionally, and practically. These allegations against him are baseless, brought by a grieving grandmother who, though well-meaning, is not equipped to care for a young child." Michael rose, his voice calm but tinged with desperation. "Your Honor, I love my daughter more than anything in this world. I've done my best to support her after losing my wife. This isn't about what's best for Emma. This is about Helen's inability to let go of her grief." Helen felt her blood boil, but she remained silent, waiting for her turn. Before Helen's lawyer could respond, Emma stood up, her small voice cutting through the tension. "That's not true." The room turned to her in shock. The judge leaned forward, her expression softening. "Emma, do you want to say something?" Emma nodded, her hands trembling. "My daddy, he doesn't care about me. He only cares about the money." Her voice cracked as tears welled in her eyes. "I heard him. He said the life insurance money was supposed to be for me, but he wanted it for himself, and he said he'd make sure Grandma couldn't take me. Michael shot to his feet, his face red with anger. This is absurd. She's just a child. She doesn't know what she's saying. The judge raised a hand to silence him. Mr. Johnson, sit down. Emma, thank you for speaking. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us? Emma hesitated, glancing at her grandmother before taking a deep breath. Mommy told me to trust my heart, and I know Grandma loves me. I want to be with her. Helen rose, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Your Honor, Emma's words aren't just feelings. They're supported by facts. She handed a folder to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. This is a letter my daughter, Sophia, wrote before her death. In it, she expressed her fears about Michael's behavior, his secrecy, his temper, and her growing sense of unease. She also urged Emma to seek the truth if anything happened to her. The judge read the letter, her face growing more serious with each line. Helen continued, her voice gaining strength. I've also included documents showing that Michael attempted to change the beneficiary of Sophia's life insurance policy just days after her death. This money was meant for Emma's future, not for his personal use. Michael's lawyer stood quickly, trying to counter. Your Honor, there's no evidence to suggest my client had ill intentions. Changing a policy after such a tragedy is a practical decision, not a criminal one. Helen's lawyer responded swiftly. Your Honor, it's not just about changing the policy. It's about the timing, the secrecy, and the context. We've also submitted evidence of financial irregularities in Mr. Johnson's accounts, indicating misuse of funds. Michael's composure began to crack. This is a witch hunt, he shouted, his voice echoing through the courtroom. Helen has hated me since the day Sophia and I got married. She's using Emma as a pawn to get back at me. The judge's voice was stern as she interrupted. Enough, Mr. Johnson. Your behavior today does not inspire confidence in your ability to provide a stable environment for your daughter. After a tense recess, the courtroom reconvened. The judge's voice was resolute as she delivered her decision. This court has reviewed the evidence and testimonies presented. It is clear that Mr. Johnson's actions demonstrate a pattern of neglect and self-interest. Effective immediately, full custody of Emma Johnson is awarded to Mrs. Helen Carter. A wave of relief swept over Helen as she clutched Emma tightly. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "You're safe now, my love." The judge continued. Additionally, based on evidence submitted regarding the circumstances of Sophia Johnson's death, this court orders an official investigation to be reopened. Mr. Johnson's financial dealings and possible involvement in her death will be scrutinized. Michael's face paled as the bailiff approached. This isn't over, he muttered under his breath, but the weight of the verdict left him visibly shaken. As the courtroom emptied, Helen knelt to meet Emma's eyes. You were so brave today, she said, her voice filled with pride. Your mommy would be so proud of you. Emma smiled faintly, wrapping her arms around her grandmother. I love you, Grandma. I love you too, sweetheart, Helen replied, holding Emma tightly. For the first time in months, they both felt a glimmer of hope for the future. The gavel struck the judge's desk and the courtroom fell silent. Michael sat frozen in his seat, his face drained of color. The judge's voice rang clear and unwavering. This court finds sufficient evidence of neglect and potential financial misconduct. Full custody of Emma Johnson is awarded to Mrs. Helen Carter. Furthermore, the court orders an official investigation into the suspicious circumstances surrounding the death of Sophia Johnson. Gasps rippled through the room, but Helen remained steady, her grip on Emma's hand firm. Emma leaned against her grandmother, her small frame trembling but relieved. For months she had carried a burden too heavy for a child, but now it was over. Michael rose abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You can't do this, he shouted. This is my daughter. The bailiff stepped forward, motioning for Michael to calm down. Mr. Johnson, your behavior today has only solidified this court's decision. You will be notified of further legal proceedings regarding the investigation into Mrs. Johnson's death. Michael's protests faded as the bailiff escorted him out of the courtroom. His presence, once a looming shadow over Emma's life, was finally removed. Days after the trial, Helen and Emma moved into a modest but cozy home at the edge of a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't much, but to Emma, it felt like a sanctuary. The house was filled with warm sunlight during the day and the soft hum of Helen's lullabies at night. Slowly, Emma began to shed the weight of her past. Helen poured her heart into creating a safe and loving environment for Emma. She cooked meals that reminded Emma of her mother, filled the house with books and games, and always made time to listen when Emma wanted to talk. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Emma picked up a worn storybook from the shelf. "Grandma, this was Mommy's favorite story to read to me," she said softly, handing it to Helen. Helen smiled, her eyes misty. "Then let's read it together, sweetheart." As Helen opened the book, her voice carried the familiar warmth that Sophia's once had. Emma closed her eyes, letting the words wash over her. In that moment, she could almost feel her mother's presence, gentle and loving, like the memory of a warm embrace. When the story ended, Emma looked up at her grandmother. "Do you think Mommy knows we're okay now?" Helen stroked Emma's hair, her voice steady but full of emotion. "I believe she does, Emma, and I think she's so proud of you, of how brave you've been." Emma smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I miss her, but I'm happy we have each other." "So am I," Helen said, pulling Emma into a hug. "And we'll keep her memory alive, together." Over the following weeks, Emma began to flourish in her new home. She started a new school, made friends, and found joy in the small, simple moments that had once felt so distant. Helen, though still grieving for her daughter, found solace in watching Emma's resilience. On a quiet afternoon, as they planted flowers in the garden, Emma turned to Helen and said, "Do you think Mommy would like these flowers?" Helen paused, her hands brushing the soil. "I think she'd love them. You know, your mom always said flowers remind us that even after the hardest winters, something beautiful can bloom." Emma nodded, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. "Like us, right? We're blooming." Helen smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "Exactly, my love. We're blooming." This story reminds us of the strength found in love, courage, and standing up for what's right. Helen and Emma's journey teaches us that even in the darkest times, hope can bloom, and justice can prevail. It's a powerful reminder that every voice matters, no matter how small, and that family is built on love, care, and unwavering support. If this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Hit the like button to let us know you enjoyed it, share this video with someone who could use a little inspiration today, and subscribe to our channel for more meaningful and uplifting stories. Your support means the world to us and helps our team continue creating content that matters. Together, we can share stories that inspire, empower, and make a difference.